Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Well, folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We're going to have a great show for you today. As usual, how are you guys doing today? We're out here out of Washington, D.C. We'll be here for the foreseeable future. Anyway, we are going to have a great show for you today. And I know you want to ask, what is the show? Oh, Bruce Pollard, first person on the chat so far. Now we have 2 1/50th party system. You mind explaining that for me, Bruce? Maybe my head is fried, so I don't quite understand that. If you are on YouTube, folks, please give me that thumbs up. Before you even start watching, thumbs up. If you're on Facebook, please go ahead and give us that Facebook good old like. Let us get started. Let the algorithm get churning. Also, please, if you will, tweet, turn, go ahead, share, do all that's necessary so that people can hear our voices, the voices of the progressive mantra. Anyway, folks, welcome aboard, welcome aboard. People are still coming. Look, don't forget, tomorrow we have 2 shows, one at 11 a.m. Central here and one at noon at Central at KPFT 90.1 FM. That one is on air on the FM channels covering the entire Southeast Texas, as well as on the internet covering where? The world. Anyway, folks, title of the show today, let me get it on screen. Bruce Pollard, 50 Republicans, 48 Democrats, and the Joe Manchin and Friend Party. You know what, brother? You have that so right. Anyhow, folks, on the show today, as you can see on the screen, Manchin killing West Virginia. You know, Manchin is one of the big objectors to things like free college, free community college. Why would he not want his state to get educated? He's also against family leave. So instead of being 12 weeks, it's down to 4 weeks. And all these things they're changing. Instead of giving the stipends to the families for in perpetuity, meaning if you need it, you get it. Now, we are going to limit it and means test. And look, I am of the feeling that this guy, there's something that I say all the time about politics. And let's say the Democratic Party and the Republican Party for that matter. But I think there are people in the parties not there for a specific people-powered ideology, but to ensure that both parties are run by the same people. And that's why if you take a look at the given, you notice corporations or some permutation thereof give to both parties. And those people that they give to have a certain behavior type. And that behavior type is generally, we have to make and keep check so that our population won't ever understand that our economic system screws them. So we don't talk about giving them more than we have to give. And anytime that line is crossed, we get the Joe Manchins of the world. We get when the Affordable Care Act was passing, we got a couple other Democrats. I can't remember the name of the Connecticut the Democrat that prevented us from getting much of what we needed. But anyhow, we're here. Folks, if you're just starting up here on YouTube, give us that thumbs up. If you're on Facebook Live, please give us that like. Anyhow, title of the show today, Manchin killing West Virginia. Also, workers are taking power. Cheney slams GOP. And I interview Ray McGinnis, who wrote the book titled Unanswered Questions, What the September 11th Families Asked. and the 9/11 Commission ignored. But you know what? Let's go ahead and get started. Tom C. got a booster shot yesterday. A little under the weather today, but glad my COVID immunity has been refreshed. I'm with you, Tom. I got mine about 4 weeks ago. I think I told you guys when I got my booster. My wife got her booster and my daughter got her booster. My mother goes for her booster today. So it's important that you're doing the right thing, that we are doing the right thing. Thank you so kindly. Bruce, I hope you've already gotten your booster, my brother. You qualify for it already based on everything that I know about you, sir. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get started. Liz Cheney, yesterday they voted to take it to the general floor to transfer Steve Bannon's case to go ahead and transfer Steve Bannon to you know where. Anyhow, as it turns out, let's go ahead and play what Cheney had to say. Very, very important. Check this out. And then we'll take it on the other side. Let's see, where is it at? There we go. Liz Cheney, I think. My God, you've got to see this. Liz Cheney took no prisoners. Let's go ahead and play the speech that she gave at the January 6th Commission, and then we'll take it on the other side.
There is no conceivably applicable privilege that could shield Mr. Bannon from testimony on all of the many other topics identified in this committee's subpoena. Because he has categorically refused to appear, we have no choice but to seek consequences for Mr. Bannon's failure to comply. Those consequences are not just important for this investigation. They are important for all congressional investigations. Mr. Bannon's and Mr. Trump's privilege arguments do, however, appear to reveal one thing. They suggest that President Trump was personally involved in the planning and execution of January 6th, and this committee will get to the bottom of that. Let me add one further thought, principally for my Republican colleagues. All agree that America is the greatest nation on the face of God's earth. Truth, justice, and our Constitution have made America great. Almost every one of my colleagues knows in your hearts that what happened on January 6th was profoundly wrong. You all know that there is no evidence of widespread election fraud sufficient to have changed the results of the election. You all know that the Dominion voting machines were not corrupted by a foreign power. You know these claims are false. Yet former President Trump repeats them almost daily, and he has now urged Republicans not to vote in 2022 and 2024. This is a prescription for national self-destruction. I ask my colleagues, please consider the fundamental questions of right and wrong here. The American people must know what happened. They must know the truth. All of us who are elected officials must do our duty to prevent the dismantling of the rule of law and to ensure that nothing like that dark day in January ever happens again.
Did you see what Liz Cheney did? She itemized each thing one by one as far as the fallacies that we have the Republicans telling their pew. But you know what? I am not a Liz Cheney fan, but I tell you that the fact that she came out the way she came out and made those statements about there was no real voter fraud, the voter machine is not real, it's not the election was not stolen, and all that good stuff, while it won't really have anything, the crazies won't see straight, there are quite a few Republicans, even ones that will vote for Donald Trump, that will look at that and give it a second look. Good job, Liz Cheney. Keep up the good work. Absolutely so. Good job, Liz Cheney. Anyhow, folks, welcome aboard. Welcome aboard, Puffin. Bruce Pollard, you got it last week. Power to you, brother. Power to you. That full immunity is supposed to kick in, I think, within 4 weeks after you take the vaccine. Anyhow, folks, we continue to have a good one here for you. Folks, if you are just getting on to YouTube, give me that thumbs up on YouTube, the video, so we can make sure that that algorithm works magic for us. Get, but not only in the live version, but as it goes into podcasts, etc. And if you are on Facebook, give us that thumbs up. Twitch, in Twitch, give us that like. If you're on Twitter, go ahead and follow me. Egberto Willies. At Egberto Willies is my Twitter. EGBERTO WILLIES. Get informed as far as what we're doing, etc., etc., etc. Biden has no taste, says E2247. E2247 also says, Laquan McDonald, rest in peace, 7 years ago, and right now it's Rahm Emanuel confirmation hearing by Senate Foreign Relations. I know where you're going, E2247. Puffin says, if we had a Senate in the USA that was not half Russian, we would have arrested Trump by now. He is exactly. Rose Williams with us. Hi, Rose. Welcome aboard. Okay, folks, let's continue with the program. Manchin is really misbehaving. There's an article on Common Dream titled, he is, and this is a statement from Ilhan Omar. He is not negotiating. He's killing the bill. Let me read the first part of that story, because a lot of people, everybody wants to treat Manchin as, oh, he's just fighting for his people in West Virginia. Manchin is not fighting for the people in West Virginia. When my daughter went to West Virginia and saw a whole lot of how those people live in the most beautiful of lands, nice mountains, beautiful scenery, but mountains that are cut from the top, coal that's dumped to the side, arsenic in their rivers, all of that because they want no regulations. They want nothing worth having because their representatives are horrendous. And if they need support, they need college, they need all these things to bring them out of the funk that state is in. But having a having a senator like Joe Manchin who's saying, don't give them anything, let them eat cake. We'll simply use them as refuse, slave labor. And my brothers and sisters in Appalachia, specifically in West Virginia, you thought slavery only looked like me? It shows you. It's all economic. It's all economic. They don't want you too smart in West Virginia. They don't want you aspiring for too much in West Virginia. They don't want you to know that we, the people, can do much to enhance West Virginia. And it's not a Republican that's screwing you. It's a Democrat. The Republicans have done screwed you a long time ago. But it's your own Democrat. And unless all of you, both Democratic and Republican West Virginians, call Joe Manchin and say, quit it, you're going down. And unless everybody remembers who his daughter is, one of the CEOs of a pharmaceutical company that is screwing you with the EpiPen, remember that. Remember that this is not somebody looking out for your virtues. This is a person that's using the economic system to screw you. And he continues in the Senate to do it. Let's not forget it. This is not about I want a bipartisan bill. If he's willing not to have a filibuster to protect your voting rights here in Texas and all over, think about it. There's nothing that we need him. Don't get me wrong. We need him. We need the vote to prevent it from going to McConnell. But the truth of the matter is he's just a mini McConnell. He's just protecting what McConnell stands for as well. Anyhow, my brothers let me read some of you before I go to the interview. Ram approved Bush's Iraq war. True. Let's see. Rose says, so true. He's totally corrupt. Rose also says he's like the owner of the company store. Exactly. Buy Manchin, get some billionaire is to buy his coal plants. Exactly. E2247 says that Ram should be ambassador anywhere. Should be ambassador anywhere is outrageous. That he should be ambassador is outrageous. That's true. Rosalind, Biden has to start playing hardball. I agree. The only thing about it is we have to be very careful with Manchin because he could be at the cusp of killing his career and just saying, to heck with it, I'm going to spite them all and just go give Mitch McConnell the leadership of the Senate again. What we have to do is take it a bit, let the progressive activists slam Manchin. Let the Congress people work with him to get the best they can for now. And then come 2022, we make him irrelevant by making creating a larger liberal Senate. We make him irrelevant. But anyhow, let me go ahead and play the interview that we have for today, and then we'll take it on the other side. Chuck Todd and his minions were talking about, the wage. Welcome to another edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Today we are honored to have Ray McGinnis. Ray McGinnis is the author of Unanswered Questions: What September 11th Families Asked and the 9/11 Commission Ignored. McGinnis believes the stories of the families of the victims of September 11th and their efforts to establish an inquiry into the attacks. He offers a doorway for theological reflection about what it means to live in a post-9/11 world. Welcome to Politics Done Right. Senor McGinnis, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thank you. It's so good to be with you today.
It's great being with you. First of all, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Vancouver, Canada. I have studied at the University of Toronto, a Bachelor of Arts degree, political science, religious studies, history, English literature. I was a Christian education director and worked at the United Church of Canada, kind of like Methodist, Presbyterian, Congregationalist, United Church of Christ in the USA. And I was involved in leadership development events and conference planning for 18 years. And then for the last 18, 19 years, have been teaching writing workshops through my own business across Canada and elsewhere, and teaching journal writing workshops and healthcare facilities to help people recover from injury and illness, helping grief support groups to journal their journey as they go through their journey of grief, having lost someone, as well as taking people on nature trails and stopping to write poems and looking at metaphors and everything. So it's a really been a good run. And I wrote a book in 2005 called Writing the Sacred, looking at the biblical Psalms and helping people write their own new spiritual psalms and poems as they would like to do in the 21st century. So that's what I've been doing. And
in a nutshell, I've got to be honest, I read about that and I read about that issue. I wanted my audience to hear that, but also more importantly, I wanted to give some context to then, why would you write a book called Unanswered Questions: What the September 11th Families Asked and the 9/11 Commission Ignored? What really was the impetus for that book?
Yeah, I would call myself the accidental author when it comes to writing about this, because I thought somebody else would write the kind of book I've ended up writing. I was in Joshua Tree National Park in southeastern California on September 11th with 60 Americans from 30 states across the USA, and 2 people there had lost, didn't lose, but they had a financial advisor who worked in one of the Twin Towers, and they were very worried he would die. He did live, but it was very, gripping for them and difficult for everybody. And I couldn't leave America for 5 days because no planes were flying, and finally took a bus across from Seattle up to Canada. And then my life went on. Fast forward in 2007, the 9/11 Commission was a blip on the screen, and the reporting up here in Canada was, very marginal. I did see Condoleezza Rice testify briefly before I was called to dinner visiting friends. And so I was surprised when I went to a bookstore in 2007 I was looking for a new book to read in the middle of a writing workshop tour in Canada. And Kristen Breitweiser, who lost her husband, Ron, in the South Tower, had written a book called Wake Up Call: The Political Education of a 9/11 Widow. And I looked at the book and decided to buy it. And I was really surprised that I could go for 6 years following the news, as I do from time to time. Sometimes there's a writing workshop for a weekend or a week and I miss things, but I'm generally on top of the news. And how could I go for 6 years and not hear anything about the families in this regard? I'd read obituaries reprinted from the New York Times and local papers, and I'd heard people read the names of those they lost on anniversaries. And I'd read a few, articles about some of the amazing people who sadly, tragically died that day. But I had not read anything in 6 years or heard anything on the radio or TV that let me know that among the families who lost loved ones, that there were hundreds and hundreds who went to New York, to Washington, D.C. to rally in June of 2002, who testified before the joint Senate and Congressional Intelligence Committees and knocked on the doors of members of Congress and Senate to demand an investigation, and including asking the president to do so. And I thought, how could I have missed this whole story, which I learned by the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission, Lee Hamilton and Thomas Keene, in their memoir, Without Precedent, referred to these families' efforts as one of the best examples of grassroots democracy and citizen advocacy in many decades. And I thought, how could I have missed that story? I mean, I knew who Rosa Parks was. She did something, way back in the late 50s to make a difference with civil rights. But here are these people who had lost loved ones, and we all talk about the families who lost loved ones and the September 11th families and the 9/11 heroes, the first responders. But here I was going six. So I decided after reading her book, I went to their website, which is still up there now, and you can look at their hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of questions that they asked the 9/11 Commission to investigate, which were never addressed. 9% of the questions were addressed. 70% were never touched on. Another about 20% were just sort of briefly grazed on or acknowledged. But it wasn't an investigation. If I went to, when I was in school or university, if I had filled out an exam and only answered 9% of the questions and just briefly mentioned a few others, I wouldn't have gotten a passing grade. So I thought that, and as the years rolled on, so about 2015, my dad had had cancer, and for a number of years, I wasn't focused on thinking about writing a book or anything like this. But it occurred to me in conversation with a number of friends, relatives in the USA and friends up here, that here was this amazing story about these families in a real accessible way, because we all understand the families. And I thought a way for me to write a book, which would be different than some other ones out there. There are numbers of other books that are, I would say, more declarative and assertive around American government complicity, possibly, and writing more hardball political science or history books. And I wanted to write a book that would be accessible for the many thousands of people who'd taken writing workshops from me, who were not news junkies, but were interested in personal narrative. And I thought, if I write this book, and in addition to some of the information that I would need to write about in terms of what these questions are that weren't addressed, if I layer it with enough personal story and lift up excerpts of testimony before the 9/11 Commission from Mary Fetchett, who lost her son Brad, or Mindy Kleinberg, who lost her husband Alan, or Monica Gabrielle, who lost her husband Richard, and introduce these 12 people on the Family Steering Committee to the reading audience, plus other first responders and other people in the story, then it'll be a book that keeps moving from chapter to chapter, and it'll be, they won't be able to put it down.
Let me stop you a second there, Ray, because once we start talking about a 9/11 book or a book of 9/11 stories not covered, the first thing that many people are going to think about is this some sort of conspiracy theory book? Yes or no?
No, I wouldn't say it's a conspiracy theory. It's a historical fact that the families, not all of them, many families and many people, when you lose a loved one and you grieve, the inclination is to tuck in, to grieve and heal, and do that in private, way off the spotlight of any kind of news cameras or microphones from reporters. But here you've got families that went to Washington, D.C., asked for an investigation. Many of the people, the dozen people on the Family Steering Committee, 5 of them that I know of, and there may be more, but 5 of them I know for sure, told the press how they voted in the year 2000, and 3 of those 5 voted for the Bush-Cheney ticket. So the people who are involved in wanting to have an investigation, many of them believe that, having voted for President Bush, that he would be their strongest advocate, that he of course would want to know what went wrong. So it's a story writing about the efforts of the families, the actual questions that they asked the 9/11 Commission. And the commissioners, by the way, when they received the hundreds and hundreds of questions from these families, they said to the press in March of 2003 that these questions would be a roadmap for how to do the investigation. And so at least the public face of how they were receiving the family's questions was with great appreciation. And so it's really, I really write about, what happens behind the scenes, how the families are hopeful. I mean, Mindy Kleinberg said they were always hopeful that the government would answer the questions. And yet yeah.
Let's break you there, because I want to kind of bring it now within the context of the program here and ask specifically, you wrote the book to give these people a voice that they hadn't heard from a voice that wasn't listened to by their own government. You presented a book that was a part of their voices. Give me an example of some of these voices that weren't heard.
Well, some of the individuals.
Yes.
Yeah. So Lori Van Auken lost her husband Kenneth Van Auken, who died in the North Tower. She lived in New Jersey. Sally Reaganhard is in Manhattan. She lost her 28-year-old son Christian, who was a U.S. Marine and now a probationary firefighter with the New York Fire Department for 9 months. Patty Casaza was a nursing student, and her husband John died in the North Tower. Monica Gabrielle lived in Manhattan with her husband Richard. They were looking forward to retirement in 10 years. Mary Fetchett lost her son, is up in New Haven, Connecticut, I think, or New Canaan, I mean. And her son Brad was like 24 years old. He died in the South Tower. And so, I mean, all of these.
Now, these people that it's tragic that these people have lost family members. Did they do some sort of a research thereafter to kind of find out exactly what they thought happened, why they wanted to go up to Congress and say, hey, you guys have not been telling the whole story?
Well, they were aware. I mean, Mary Fetchett, testifying before the 9/11 Commission on the 31st of March, 2003, said, in 1986, there was this Challenger space shuttle with a number of astronauts that sadly died, 28th of January. And within 5 days, President Reagan said, we need to find out what went wrong so this doesn't happen again. And here you have the greatest loss of life on US domestic soil since Pearl Harbor in December of 1941. Why wouldn't the government want to know what went wrong, to fix whatever went wrong, like whoever was falling down on the job or whatever the protocols are, so that they can learn the tough lessons to make the nation safer going forward.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, of these people that had any of these people, I know they had questions, and of any of these questions, were any of these questions informed by something, some entity that really kind of said the narrative that we're hearing on national TV isn't necessarily the appropriate narrative?
It's an interesting question about the catalyst for the momentum. One of the first things that happens is in October of 2001, Congress is discussing, I think, a $14-15 billion bailout package for the airlines. And at that point, somebody on the congressional floor said, I think we better have the families also get some compensation too. So this is a big catalyst, because you have all of these individual people, many of them who are, I mean, some of them are familiar with politics. Some of them, Kristen Breitweiser, had training in law, but many of them, I mean, Mary Fetchett said she was never involved in politics in any way before this. But now you have families gathering together because the government has communicated with them, probably by letter, and said, you need to come to this hall in New York City or Washington, D.C. and have an information session about the Victims Compensation Fund.
Let me stop you there. I got to stop you there, because this is a political show, okay? And the most important political statement that you've just made for a program like mine is a statement you just made. The government created a $15 billion fund to bail out airlines before it even occurred to them to actually create some support fund for the victims and the victims' families of 9/11 casualty, those buildings falling. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
That is profound, and that tells much about who we are. Continue, please. I just had to, I just needed to get that out there for our many. We have many viewers from all different ideologies. And when we try to explain to them that the way our system works is always catered towards, you know whom, the corporatocracy, and that people be damned. You just said it in a book that likely had nothing to do with this type of politics. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who are like Carrie Lemack is one of the people. There are a whole number of, dozens of different 9/11 family groups that are forming for various reasons in different places. One of them is called the Families of September 11, or the FOS 11. And Carrie Lemack and Robin Weiner are two of the people from that group that end up on the family steering committee that I'm following. But Carrie Lemack goes to one of these victims' compensation fund meetings, and she asks permission if she can write down the names and numbers of some other family members so they can talk to each other and stay in